When the truth comes, the lies gotta run. Let me tell you something about truth. Truth don't need an invitation. It don't need approval. It don't ask for a seat at the table. When it walks in the room, it rearranges the furniture. It don't knock, it kicks the door open. And the moment it shows up, every lie that was standing tall just a minute ago starts trembling. Because truth don't argue, it don't stutter, and it sure don't run in circles. It stands, it shines. It breaks everything false into pieces. Now you gotta understand something about this world we living in. People get real comfortable with lies when the lie is making them feel powerful, when the lie is protecting their image, when the lie is keeping their hands clean while somebody else gets dirty. And when they start to realize that lie is wearing thin, they get nervous, because deep down they know truth is undefeated. Truth ain't scared of nothing. You can hide it for a while. You can bury it under reports, under microphones, under political statements. But eventually, the truth starts rising. It always does. That's what we're seeing in this moment right now. All this noise, all this tension, all these accusations flying around, it ain't new. What's new is that somebody finally stood up and said, "Hold up, we not gonna let this go unchecked. We not gonna let this lie run around like it owns the place." Because when you've been quiet too long, when you've been patient too long, when you've been dignified while they've been reckless, eventually, the truth gets tired of sitting in the back. And when it gets tired, it speaks. And when that truth starts coming out, you notice how everybody gets uncomfortable. Folks who were loud suddenly go quiet. People who were bold start backtracking. Media outlets start switching up their tone. Why? Because truth don't need special effects. It don't need to yell. It don't need a script. It just needs to be spoken. And the moment it is, lies start doing what they always do when they get caught. They run. They scatter. They fall apart because they never had a foundation to begin with. See, when the truth walked into the Canada situation, it didn't come to play. It came to correct. It came to clear the fog, because the problem wasn't just what was said. It was how loud and confident the lie was said, like nobody was gonna check it. Like nobody had the nerve to stand up and say, "Where's your proof? Where's the facts? Where's the backbone behind that accusation?" And for a while, people watched. They waited, some even got swept up in the narrative. But then the moment came, the mic was picked up, and the truth started talking. And it didn't talk with anger. It didn't talk with panic. It talked with purpose. It talked with calm strength, because that's what truth does. It don't flinch, it don't shout, it don't get emotional. It just stands there, eye to eye with the lie, and says, "You done." And just like that, the temperature changes. That's what happens when somebody carries the truth with authority. It doesn't just change the conversation, it shuts the nonsense down. It reminds people that just because you've been quiet doesn't mean you've been weak. Just because you ain't said nothing don't mean you didn't notice. And that's the power of timing, because truth don't always show up first, but when it does show up, it always finishes the job. And the lies, they start folding, the narratives start shifting, the noise starts fading, because you can't keep pretending once the truth is standing right next to you. You can't keep pointing fingers once the facts are laid bare. And you sure can't keep running the same tired playbook when someone just rewrote the rules with integrity and fire. There are moments in every conflict where you gotta ask, where's the foundation? You start seeing cracks in the stories. You start noticing how the questions never get answered straight. You start seeing who's avoiding accountability and who's facing it head on. And that's the test right there. Because lies run when truth shows up, not because the lie didn't look good, but because it didn't have anything holding it up. It was built on convenience, not conviction, on assumption, not evidence, on fear, not fact. When that truth got spoken, when the truth came out bold and clear, It wasn't just about correcting an accusation. It was about re-establishing what real leadership sounds like. It was about restoring the balance between noise and knowledge. It was about saying, we're not going to let you shape our name with your version of the story. We're going to tell it ourselves. That's what happens when truth takes the mic. It don't just expose the lie, it reclaims the platform. It takes back the respect, it puts the weight back where it belongs. And every lie, no matter how loud it was screaming before, suddenly gets real quiet when the truth walks in with its chest out and its head high. The loudest one in the room ain't always right. You ever walk into a room and the one doing all the talking, all the finger pointing, all the name calling seems like they got it all figured out? They're loud, they're confident, they got the media backing them up, headlines lined up like soldiers ready to fight for their version of the truth. But let me tell you something that'll change how you see the world. The loudest one in the room ain't always right. Volume don't equal value. Just because somebody's voice is louder don't mean their message carries any weight. Sometimes noise is just noise. We live in a world where whoever shouts first gets the spotlight, where if you say something with enough energy, people will confuse it for honesty. But leadership, real leadership, knows how to spot the difference between sound and substance. And if you don't know that difference, you'll find yourself clapping for lies just because they came with a podium and a camera. You'll be nodding along with someone who's building their argument on shaky ground, and before you know it, the lie's been repeated so many times, it starts sounding like the truth. That's what happens when noise gets more airtime than knowledge. That's what happens when the world becomes addicted to headlines instead of homework. They start believing that whoever is loudest is also the one who's right, but real truth don't scream, it stands. It don't need fireworks to get your attention. It doesn't need to interrupt, shout over, or bully anyone to be heard. Truth waits for its moment, and when it speaks, it makes everybody stop talking. You gotta understand there's strategy in shouting. Some folks raise their voice to cover the holes in their story. If you listen closely, they ain't really saying much, they just saying it with fire. They repeat the same lines, the same claims, the same empty phrases, hoping that if they shout it long enough, they'll drown out the facts. But when the facts show up, when the receipts get pulled out, when the timelines don't add up, when the narrative starts collapsing under its own weight, volume won't save them. That's exactly what we're seeing in the way this situation with Canada and India unfolded. One side got loud. One side came out strong with accusations, putting emotion before evidence, energy before accountability. And for a moment the noise worked. It echoed around the world. It got people riled up, sparked conversations, made headlines. But here's the thing about noise, it don't last when the truth shows up with poise, with preparation, with precision. Because when you know your facts, when you've done your homework, when you speak from a place of integrity, you don't need to raise your voice. The power is in the message, not the megaphone. So when India finally responded, when leadership stepped forward and spoke, it wasn't reactive. It was deliberate. Calm, focused, and that shook the room more than any shouting ever could. Because while one side was throwing words like darts in a dark room, the other side flipped the switch and lit the whole place up. They said, let's talk details, let's talk facts, let's talk history, let's talk real accountability. And suddenly the volume dropped. The noise lost its force, because truth don't need to overpower. It just needs to outlast. Now let me be real with you. Sometimes people get intimidated when they hear someone speak with so much confidence and volume. They assume, well, they must be right, look how sure they sound. But confidence ain't always rooted in clarity. Sometimes it's just arrogance wrapped in urgency. You gotta have the wisdom to pause and ask, where's the evidence, where's the foundation, what are they really saying behind all this volume? Because the truth don't rush. It don't panic, it don't perform. It arrives fully dressed in peace and clarity, and it stays long after the crowd's gone home. That's how you know the difference. Real leadership ain't out here trying to win the shouting contest. It's out here trying to win the long game, and the long game ain't built on noise. It's built on truth, accountability, discipline, and respect. And when that truth finally gets its moment to speak, it don't even have to match the energy. It just lays the facts out on the table, calmly, boldly, and lets the silence that follows do the work. Because when the truth is real, it don't need backup dancers. It don't need hype. It just needs one opportunity, one open mic, and suddenly all that shouting starts sounding real empty. And that's what's unfolding now. All the loud claims, the noise, the spotlight, it's starting to dim. Because a steady, clear, grounded voice is standing on the other side saying, we ain't here to play the drama game, we're here to deal in truth. And that voice? It's shaking the room louder than any volume ever could. Because truth has this way of exposing things that yelling never could. It makes the lies look small, it makes the noise look foolish, and the louder they try to cover it up, the more obvious it becomes that they're running out of answers. Because real answers don't need to scream, they just need to stand up and speak when the time is right. Respect ain't given, it's earned in the fire. There comes a time in every man's life, in every nation's journey, where you realize that respect isn't something you can buy, borrow, or beg for. Respect is something you earn when you stand tall in the fire and don't flinch. It's something people hand over when they see you ain't just talking. You're walking, moving, holding your ground when the world tries to push you back. That's how it works in life. That's how it works in leadership. That's how it works on the world stage. And that's what we're witnessing right now, plain as day. See, for too long, some countries walked around with the mindset that they got a pass. That their narrative automatically gets believed. That their position is always right. That if they point the finger first, everybody else gotta stand in the corner and apologize before even speaking. But that era, that mindset, it's being challenged now. Because when you've done your homework, when you've earned your place, when you've suffered in silence for too long while being misunderstood, overlooked, and underestimated, you reach a point where you say, no more, not in anger, not in arrogance, but in conviction, and conviction is a whole different beast. Conviction don't seek revenge, it seeks clarity. Conviction doesn't need applause, it needs alignment. It says, I know who I am, I know what I stand for, I know what I've been through, and I'm not about to let anybody rewrite my story just because they're louder than me. That's the space India has stepped into. That's the fire it walked through. And now that it's walking out on the other side, it's walking with a different kind of energy. The kind that don't ask for respect, it commands it. Let me break it down to you like this. If you've ever been in a room where people look at you sideways, questioning your worth, waiting for you to slip, hoping you'll stay quiet so they can keep their comfort, you know how it feels to earn respect the hard way, and once you earn it, not from favors, not from fear, but from truth and consistency, you hold your head different. Your shoulders straighten, your words hit deeper because you know what it cost to get here. That's what makes it real. That's what makes it powerful, and you can see it. You can see it in every word spoken, every answer given, every refusal to be intimidated. It ain't about being loud, it's about being ready. It's about being rooted. When India stepped up and spoke its truth to Canada, it wasn't lashing out, it was standing tall. It was saying, you may have built your assumptions, you may have framed your story, but we built our backbone, we built our patience, we built our case. And when you've built your case brick by brick, you don't panic when they throw stones. You build higher. There's something beautiful about a person or a nation that's grown tired of being misread and finally decides to take the pen back and write the next chapter themselves. No co-authors, no edits, just the raw, undiluted truth. That's what we're seeing now, because for years India's been watching, listening, enduring. But now, it's responding, and it's not responding with outrage, it's responding with ownership. Ownership of its voice. Ownership of its dignity. Ownership of its position in this world. Respect grows in silence and speaks in storms. And you don't get it by yelling or crying foul. You get it by showing up when it's tough. You get it when you take the hit and keep moving. You get it when you refuse to let lies define you. That's where India is operating from now. It's no longer waiting for validation. It's building its own table, setting its own standard, and saying, if you want to talk, let's talk. But we ain't coming to beg. We're coming to balance the scale. You want to know how a nation earns global respect. It's not in the size of its army or the volume of its voice. It's in the strength of its principles. It's in the courage to stand alone if necessary and say, this is what we believe. This is how we move, and no amount of pressure is going to rewrite our truth. That's power. That's presence. And when you operate from that place, people who used to talk over you start listening. People who used to doubt you start watching. People who used to question your worth start adjusting their tone. And here's the thing, once you earn that respect, you don't ever have to ask for it again. It follows you. It echoes in every room you step into. It's carved into your identity, and every time someone tries to test you, you ain't got to flinch because the fire already made you fireproof. That's what we're seeing now. This isn't about anger. This isn't about revenge. This is about dignity, identity, and claiming your rightful space in a world that tried to keep you boxed in. When you step out of that box with your head high and your voice steady, the game changes not just for you, but for everybody watching you rise. You can't be silent when the truth is on trial. There's a moment in life where silence is no longer strength. It becomes surrender, where staying quiet doesn't keep the peace, it gives permission. Where biting your tongue doesn't make you noble, it makes you invisible. And when the truth is on trial, when lies are being dressed up in suits and ties and fed to the world like gospel, when stories are being spun faster than facts can catch up, you got two choices. You can sit down and hope the storm passes, or you can stand up and speak like your voice is the only anchor left holding the ship together. Because silence in the face of injustice ain't humility, it's complicity. See, the world got this twisted idea that diplomacy means never disagreeing. That to keep relations smooth, you gotta swallow your pride and let false narratives spread unchecked. But real leadership, real conviction, knows that peace built on falsehood is a fragile peace. It's a glass tower that's bound to shatter. And when you've seen your name dragged, your values questioned, your motives twisted, you can't just watch from the sidelines and hope the truth floats to the surface on its own. You gotta rise up and pull it out of the deep with your own two hands, because if you don't defend your truth, someone else will define your story. That's the crossroad India stood at. That's the moment it faced when accusations started flying with no hard proof. When narratives were shaped to serve agendas, when a trusted relationship was tested in front of the whole world. And instead of reacting with rage or retreating into silence, the response was a masterclass in strength under control. A calm, clear, and calculated voice came forward, not to beg for validation, but to present the truth with spine and soul. Because when you know who you are and what you stand for, you ain't gotta shout to be heard. You just speak, and the world listens. Let me tell you something about truth. It's not always convenient. It's not always neat. It doesn't come wrapped in fancy PR statements. Sometimes it shows up like a storm, shaking the whole room. But that's the kind of storm that clears the air, that washes the fake clean off the surface, that makes people finally see what's been hidden. And in that moment, the people who stay silent become part of the problem, not the solution. Because the truth don't need silence, it needs soldiers. People who will carry it even when it's heavy, even when it's unpopular, even when it's dangerous. You know, the easiest thing to do in a crisis is to play it safe. Keep your head down, say the bare minimum, avoid confrontation. That's what a lot of folks expect. That's what some leaders do. But when you do that, you give the lie room to grow roots. You let fiction become fact. And by the time you finally speak up, the damage's already done. But when you speak early, when you speak clearly, when you speak with authority not to attack but to illuminate, you stop the lie before it becomes law. That's what we saw when India broke the silence and said, let's set the record straight. And this ain't just about countries. This is about life. How many times have people spoken on your name, twisted your intentions, painted you in colors you never wore? And how many times did you stay silent, thinking it's better to avoid the drama, better to take the high road, better to wait it out? But silence don't protect you, it erases you, it lets other people write your legacy, and then one day you wake up and realize the world only knows the version of you that someone else created. You realize you gave up your voice to keep the peace, and in doing so you lost your power. Speaking the truth doesn't mean starting a war. It means drawing a line. It means saying, this is where I stand and I will not be moved. That's not ego, that's clarity, that's identity. That's the kind of leadership that doesn't shake in the storm because it was born in the storm. It's the kind of leadership that doesn't chase applause because it's built on purpose. And when purpose meets pressure, the real ones don't fold. They rise, they speak, they push back not out of hate, but out of love for the truth and the future it protects. So, when you hear a nation speak up, not to create chaos but to bring clarity, that ain't aggression, that's integrity. That's the sound of a people who have had enough of being misunderstood, misrepresented, and misquoted. That's the sound of a chapter closing and a new one beginning, one where the truth doesn't beg for attention, it commands it. And the ones who have spent years watching in silence now realize you can't be quiet when your name is being used to write someone else's script. You can't stay seated when your truth is being tried in the court of public opinion with no jury and no justice. You gotta speak, you gotta rise, and you gotta stand so tall that the lie has to look up just to see you. Power moves ain't made in the spotlight, they're built in the dark. People always love to talk about the moment someone wins. They clap when the curtain rises. They cheer when the spotlight hits. But what they never talk about, what they refuse to see, is the grind that went on in the dark before that moment showed up. The long nights, the silent battles, the unseen decisions, because that's where real power is made. Not when everybody's watching, but when nobody is. And that's exactly what's happening right now in this India versus Canada situation. It ain't just about who's louder, it's about who's been building in silence long enough to strike with precision. When it matters most, this is the thing about power. It don't need to announce itself. It don't have to bang the table, make noise, or throw tantrums. Real power moves in silence until it's time to move the board, and when it does, everybody knows. See, India ain't reacting emotionally. It's not scrambling for validation. It's been playing chess in a room full of checkers. It's been preparing, gathering facts, watching patterns, waiting for the right moment, not out of fear, but out of strategy. That's what power does. It don't flinch, it calculates, and when it speaks, The whole room adjusts now, let's be clear. This situation between India and Canada didn't start in front of the cameras. It's just now being played out there. But what people miss is that the preparation didn't start when the drama went public. It started way before that, when meetings were quiet, when messages were subtle, when moves were being made that nobody paid attention to. And that's the secret. If you want to win in life, in business, in leadership, you don't wait for the lights to come on. You get ready in the dark, because when the light hits, you won't have time to prepare. You either are ready, or you're not. There are levels to this. Some countries play the game of politics like it's poker bluff, call, fold, but others play it like chess, slow, deliberate, with vision. And that's what's on full display here. When India came forward and pushed back on Canada's narrative, it wasn't a rash move. It was a rehearsed truth. It wasn't desperation. It was declaration, and the way it was done, calm, unbothered, firm. Because when you've been preparing for the storm, you don't panic when the clouds show up. In life, most people only show up when the cameras are rolling. They only work when someone's watching. But the people who change the game, the ones who leave a mark, they put in the work when no one's clapping, they build when no one's complimenting, they prepare not for praise but for purpose. That's how greatness gets built. That's how movements are born, not on the front page but in the background. And then, when the time comes, that quiet preparation becomes an unstoppable force. You've got to understand. When someone moves with confidence, it's not because they're cocky, it's because they know what they've built, and India right now is moving with that kind of confidence, the kind that doesn't need to yell, the kind that doesn't need to over-explain. It's the power that comes from receipts, from facts, from being rooted in truth. And when someone is rooted in truth, no matter how loud the accusations get, they stay grounded. Because they know the storm can't shake what's been built on a solid foundation. And this lesson ain't just about global politics. This is personal too, because some of y'all reading this have been grinding in silence, building your dreams while everybody else is sleeping. You've been doubted, overlooked, talked about, and you've been tempted to respond, to defend yourself, to prove everybody wrong. But the real power, it's in staying focused. It's in letting your results be your response. Because the louder they get, the more silent you become, not because you're weak, but because you're working. See, power that lasts doesn't come from reaction. It comes from readiness, and when India responded to Canada, it wasn't reacting to the headlines. It was revealing the groundwork that had already been done. The kind of preparation that don't happen overnight, the kind that don't need approval. That's how you know the difference between noise and strategy. One just wants attention, the other wants alignment. You don't build a legacy by responding to everything. You build it by knowing what to respond to and when. That's discipline, that's maturity, that's the kind of energy that doesn't crumble under pressure. It gets sharper, and right now, what we're witnessing isn't just a political moment. It's a masterclass in restraint, in preparation, in choosing the right moment to speak and the right tone to use. That's how battles are won. That's how stories get rewritten. That's how silent strength becomes the loudest voice in the room.